The weather in a few minutes' time.
Now, lawyers for Gary McKinnon say they will challenge the Home Secretary's decision not to block his extradition to the United States.
Alan Johnson said last night he'd seen no medical evidence to suggest that extraditing Mr McKinnon, who has Asperger's syndrome, would breach his human rights. Janis Sharp is Gary's mother and joins us this morning.
Morning.
Could you just tell us, first of all, how Gary reacted to what he heard yesterday?
Oh, he's in extreme distress. He's actually, what's worse, he's extremely quiet, and it's actually more worrying when he's quiet, because he is suicidal. He is under the care of Professor Jeremy Turk, and he's actually gone to see him today, thankfully. But when he's quiet, I worry even more, because this is, I mean, to keep someone in the heightened state of terror for almost 8 years is against anyone's human rights. I wouldn't do it to an animal, you wouldn't do it to an animal. For a person to go through this every second of the waking day on a daily basis is against anyone's human rights.
The Home Secretary has said there are legitimate concerns over Mr McKinnon's health, but we have sought and received assurances from United States authorities that his needs will be met. And what is your response to that?
A complete nonsense. Billy Cottrell had Asperger's, was in California jail. His treatment was horrendous. A judge added 3 years onto his sentence and declared him a terrorist, because judges in America can do that. There was no charge of terrorism. He was an eco-terrorist, apparently. Stephen Hawkins and lots of scientists tried to get him out and couldn't. He was in solitary. Prisoners beat him up. With Asperger's, there's no racial differences, so he didn't know to stand beside the right...
Is your main concern the way that Gary might be treated in the American legal system, considering his medical diagnosis?
Well, my main concern is that Gary shouldn't be being extradited.
Do you think he shouldn't face trial at all in the United States?
Absolutely not. He'd face trial here. When Gary committed this, it was done before this treaty was even brought in. And we voted in a government to uphold and protect our rights. They gave them away. They're not their rights to give away. They're our rights. People died for them in First and Second World War. They don't have the right to give them away. If we want to take an American, we have to give probable cause, which is evidence. It's easier to extradite someone from Britain to America than it is from one American state to another. Baroness Scotland said, well, of course we have to provide more evidence for America because of their constitution. It's as close as we can get. Why don't we announce we want probable cause, we want equal rights to Americans and to every other citizen in the rest of the world?
Can I ask you about the legal advice? I know you've sought independent legal advice yourselves, and the Home Secretary says he has sought independent legal advice as to what he is able to do within the law. Now, there seems to be some discrepancy here. You're saying that he has the ability to step in, make a decision of his own volition, if you like, and within the law. He's saying that he simply does not have that power.
Alan Johnson doesn't know, because he's listening to civil servants that have been there for years, and he listens to Baroness Scotland, who is the Attorney General, and her expertise is family law. Who gave him the advice was Labour appointed as Minister of Terror Laws, Lord Carlisle. He's a top QC. He said the extradition can be halted by Alan Johnson. That is their own person they've appointed.
So to be clear about this, you're saying that the Home Secretary is ignoring the legal advice he himself sought?
Of his own... Well, he didn't seek it from Lord Carlisle, but Lord Carlisle gave that advice, and Lord Carlisle was appointed by the Labour government as the Minister of Terror Laws, and he said that they can stop the extradition. 2 QCs in Cherie Blair's matrix chambers have said that they can stop the extradition. Now, they're the top people in the land. They're not going to put their reputations in the line by saying something that's untrue. Alan Johnson has taken advice from civil servants that are there through all the governments, and they're also from Baroness Scotland, whose area is family law. Basically, he should be standing up for our rights. The British government should be standing up for our rights. For the Americans to be able to wait 3 years before applying for extradition was wrong, because they waited until this treaty was brought into being. What's the point in fighting to make charges have to come within 28 days or 48 days, which we've been doing, when we allow another country to wait 3 years before applying for an extradition? It makes a mockery of the 28 or 48-day law.
How much fight have you got left in you?
I've been tearful today, to be honest, because I'm extremely worried about Gary. I can fight, but when I think of what Gary's going through, I find it very difficult to handle. But I've got fight, I'll fight on, and Gary's got the best solicitors in the world. They're applying for a judicial review of the Home Secretary. Now, normally you're allowed 3 months to have this, but Alan Johnson has just ruled we've only got 7 days. Please, Alan Johnson, give us the 3 months that everyone else has, because if the government changes, they might stop Gary's extradition. Why does the Labour government object to this? Why do they want to do it so quickly to prevent Gary the last chance he's got? Give us the 3 months that everyone else is entitled to.
Can I just give you a last thought? I mean, is it your sense that the Home Secretary, Mr Johnson, does not appreciate condition? I mean, do you think he is, if you're like, hiding behind the technicalities of the law and not hearing what you're saying about how he is and the effect this is having on him?
I think Alan Johnson, he's in that position. He's not a lawyer. He admitted during a debate in the House of Commons he's a hack politician that takes advice from the people around him. I think he doesn't understand it. I think that this government bends over backwards to appease America for whatever reason. The French stand up for French. The Americans, we wouldn't be able to extradite under the same circumstances. But our country, for some reason, our government, not our politicians, because lots of the politicians are on Gary's side. The Select Committee came out and said on the 10th of November that the government should stop the extradition. The Director of Public Prosecutions was questioned in the same morning when I wasn't there, and he, in his evidence, said that ministers can halt the extradition. So they can, but for some reason the people at the top in the cabinet and the government are afraid of America. And also, America's acting as though Gary's Osama bin Laden. They've admitted he left silly notes on their computers. We had an expert, computer expert, that said that what Gary had done, he didn't shut the machines down. The financial damage was for firewalls they should have had there in the first place. And even normal computers would have flagged up that Gary was there.
Well, thank you for your time this morning.
Pleasure.
And we will be hearing over the next few days what happens next. So
Thank you.
Thank you.
Janis Sharp, Gary McKinnon's mum. OK.